It's crazy because I had you on this podcast, episode 290,
Mm-hmm.
and then now this is episode 370 something, and a lot has changed in the past 80 episodes for you.
Yeah.
And that was so exciting to be able to witness that journey in the past 6 months for you. Take me through arguably the most exciting or the most heartwarming part of that journey, which was maybe meeting Charlie Munger.
Okay, so the background here is essentially I'm doing the exact same thing I've done for the last 7 years, except the only thing I changed was the business model. I had a terrible idea where when I first started in like 2016, I remember like there was just a handful of, I guess they're called agencies, where like you go and you say, hey, I want to sell ads on my podcast. How do I do that, right? And at the time, they're like, I think the minimum amount of, like you'd have to have like 50,000 like listeners. And I remember thinking back then, I was like, what? Like that's like, I maybe had like a couple thousand, maybe like, I don't know, 3,000. I don't remember what the number is. I was like, that's insane. So I had to like figure out ways for it to turn it into a business. And so it was a subscription-based podcast for a long time, which is really stupid because the most powerful thing that you have as a podcaster is like, if your podcast is good, it converts all your listeners into true believers, right? And what did I do? I had my biggest asset, which is my very differentiated, unique podcast. I don't think there's another podcast like it in the world. And I put a giant fucking paywall in front of it. Now, the crazy thing is I was able to grind out, and I had like several thousand like paid subscribers. So it's still like a decent, like you're making like dentist money or doctor money, right? And I wind up, there's like a long story here. There's a bunch of podcasters that pulled me to the side. Wound up really the thing that opened everything up is that founders spread through very influential people. And because it's so unique and because I think it's like arguably the highest quality entrepreneur podcast in the world, it started getting the attention of very like influential and very successful people. And those are the exact people that you want in your audience, right? And I wanted becoming friends with Patrick O'Shaughnessy, who has, in my opinion, everybody knows his podcast is the best like the best. I've thought about the business model of podcasting every day for 7 years. I go and like take notes on how other podcasts make money. I've done this forever. I've analyzed like other people's audiences. He's got by far the most valuable business podcast audience in the world. If you figure the size and the quality, like the average net worth of the fucking people that listen to his podcast is insane. Some of the most successful people in the world. And so he wound up finding the podcast because I had listened to this podcast forever. Like you can go and look at my notebook and I have notes from like 2019, right? Way before I met him, way before we became friends. And what happened is like other people he trusted their judgment, other investors, other entrepreneurs were like, you got to listen to this Founders podcast. It was completely paywall. These are paid subscribers. So he's like, the first time it happened, he's like, okay, well, the second time it happened, he's like, oh yeah, I'll listen to it. Third time he buys a subscription but doesn't listen. I remember the day because I knew his email address. I was like, oh shit. And that was one of the benefits of having a subscription podcast actually. Because there's very limited data on podcasts, right? We don't know who's listening other than like you get messages or emails. When you have a subscription podcast, you know who's listening. And so that was another thing where it's like, there's no way I'm going to quit because I saw some of these email addresses and you couldn't believe it. And so anyways, he's like, by the time the fifth person had said it, I think he said this on our episode together on his podcast. He's like, all right, this is enough. Like this is 5 people that he respects and trusts. And he starts listening. And then he tweets, this is like a year ago. Then he tweets, hey, I never find new podcasts to listen to. I think he didn't know who I was. He's like, I think David Senra's Founders podcast is excellent. And dude, I checked my email the next day and like just, because you get an email every time a new subscriber. It's like you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I'm like, holy shit. That's off one tweet. And then I screenshotted it. This guy named Sam Hinkie, who's got a cult-like following. He's the former general manager of 76ers. He's an investor in San Francisco or the Bay Area. Another person with like very mysterious, very like insane network, just like Patrick. Me and him were friends because he loved the podcast, and Sam's been like this relentless supporter of mine. And I screenshotted it. And I knew him and Patrick were friends, so I screenshotted it. I was like, oh, look at this. And I sent it to him. I was like, look what your friend Patrick did. And he immediately put me and Patrick in a group chat. He's like, you two need to know each other. And me and Patrick wind up talking like 10 minutes later for like an hour and a half. and then just building a friendship. We were interested in the same stuff. No business, no idea to do a business arrangement at all. Just literally obsessed with podcasts. He's very curious, loves to read, loves entrepreneurship, loves founders, that kind of stuff. And then there's a series of things. I'll like truncate this story, so I'm not fucking talking for an hour and a half about this. There's a bunch of shit that happened, but basically he's like, I called him up one day. I was like, hey, I'm gonna do. Let me tell you my mindset before I made this phone call. I'm a huge fan of podcasts, right? I listen to all of them. I just love the medium, and I'm also super competitive. Not zero in a zero sum mindset. Podcasting is all positive sum. All the podcasters know each other. We all share information. Like I am literally taking an idea from I learned in Rockefeller's biography, which is what he would do in the early days of the oil industry, which is really just refining oil. He would go around and build secret allies and collect information and share information. I do that with all these podcasters. Like I will go out and find them and then share information. Like, hey, we did this. This works, and like. We're really colluding, if you really think about it. It's just not against the law because it's not a monopoly here. So everybody's positive something, but I am also competitive. And I just remember I was like, one day I was like, I want to fight. Like, we're operating an entire market. The business podcast, the segment of podcasting I think is by far going to be the most valuable is obviously the business podcast because who listens? It's like the most successful people in the world listen because they want to continuously learn because they're building empires and they can turn that knowledge into profit. But they don't sit around watching fucking YouTube videos. They're learning. They're using podcasts because they want to learn when their eyes are busy. And so that's what makes it super powerful that a lot of podcasters don't actually understand one of the most superpowers of podcasting, right? This whole like push into video is very fascinating to me. Patrick has the most valuable business audience in the world. Where's his video at? I don't see it. Do you?
But just because someone has video doesn't mean that it's inherently not valuable.
No. It's not. It's saying who you're targeting.
Right.
It's thinking through the process, right? Like we sat down and talked. We didn't finish, but like my friends David and Ben on The Acquired, we have this conversation all the time because they have like all this fucking camera setups. They have all this beautiful video, and yet like 99.5% of their audience listens. And I'm like, guys, you guys are adding a lot of complications here. And so now if you look at their YouTube page, they're only uploading ones that are like native, like the ones that we do in person. You know what I mean? I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying that like it depends on who you're targeting. If you're like a comedian, comedian podcasters definitely should have video. Because those are just they're trying to. What is the end goal? Like they're making a podcast, they're growing, they're going to make a lot of money in ad revenue, but they want your ass in the seat when they come to your town, right? That's their end. That's why it started. And so they're trying to sell you a $30 or $50 ticket. That person is not the same person listening to podcasts like Invest Like the Best or Founders. That's my main point. Mm-hmm. Just thinking about it a little deeper. So, anyways, there's a bunch of things that were happening, and I was like, I want to fight. I think that if I only make it for my podcast is very narrowly targeted, right? It's made for founders, for entrepreneurs. Now, there's a bunch of people. There's investors that listen to it. There's executives that listen to it. There's young kids that listen to it. They'll get value out of it, but it's very narrowly focused at that. And so my idea was like, okay, if Founders is available to listen to in any other podcast player, just like any other business podcast, right? And this fucking maniac has spent 7 years reading 305 books. That's over 120,000 pages, taking over 20,000 highlights, like spending 10,000 hours. Like I've spent way longer than that. You know what I mean? And you distill down the lessons for some of the people that have built the greatest businesses in history to a couple hundred hours that you can listen to anytime you want. And you have the option to press play on that or press play on something else. I think I'm going to win that for the people that I want in my audience, right? And so I was like, I want to fight. Like I want to fight on a level playing field. Let's see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm not fighting on a level playing field because I have a big ass paywall in front of it. So I was like, I'm going to yank off the paywall, right? And I'm just going to this is another thing. It's like I'm going to trust that this will all work out. I'm essentially nuking a business that a business generating a wonderfully nice like lifestyle.
When did you do that?
So I had part of the stuff I never know if I really want to reveal all that's in my head, because like it is some crazy shit that goes on in there, right? But I started more and more. I do this because like you get messages like, oh, I'm the same way, and I know that I'm not unique, and that's why I share such, like, people are like, this guy's fucking a little wild. It's like there's everybody. It may be a small percentage of the population, but there's millions of people that are just like me, and they're alive today. They've been alive in the past, and they will be alive in the future. So there's actually a video of do you like MMA? Do you watch UFC?
Yes.
Okay. So
By the way, on that topic, did you fight in 2006?
no.
Oh, it comes up when you search.
No,
It's a different David Senra.
Yes. So there's a bunch of David Senras. No, there's a bunch of David Senras. One's like a professional MMA guy. One's like a go-kart like racer, and then another just like a Twitch streamer. So ChatGPT thinks I'm a Twitch streamer. I'm like, no, I don't stream on Twitch, buddy. That was hilarious.